Next, a dedicated couple spends 10 years on a massive restoration project, then invites the whole county to an open house. That's next when Restore America continues.
Brought to you by Garden.com. Now you don't need a green thumb, just an index finger.
If you travel west of Indianapolis, chances are you'll be rolling down the National Road, historic Highway 40, our nation's first interstate highway. A 5,000 square foot house sits just off this road near the town of Stilesville, Indiana, and is the pride of the community here, thanks to a couple who spent 10 years restoring it. The stately home, known as Rising Hall, was built in the early 1870s by Melville McAfee, a major mule supplier to the Union Army. After the war, the estate became a breeding farm for racehorses, and by the early 20th century, its barn was converted into a seed mill. However, by the 1970s, the home was abandoned by the last owners as being too damp and cold. It was an eyesore for anyone traveling Highway 40, but for Walt and June Prosser, it was the restoration project they'd been looking for.
Wow. Of all the things we've looked at, this has the most potential. And I could see great things happening with this house, something that I couldn't possibly believe that was still around and still hadn't fallen into the ground.
I thought it looked like the Addams Family house on TV, and it was really kind of spooky looking. And I came through that door, and I saw this staircase for the first time, and I fell in love with it, even though it was painted pink. If you can imagine this beautiful staircase pink.
Walt and June Prosser didn't hesitate. They purchased the home a few days later and began restoration work immediately. Then the neighbors began to talk.
Walt had really started working on it, I think, about the time I moved here. It was in terrible shape. I remember many times driving past here with friends, commenting on what terrible shape the house was in, also commenting about the crazy couple who was spending years rehabbing it.
But while the neighbors were talking, Walt and June Prosser were doing.
We did 99% of the work. First thing we did was tear down an old concrete block porch that had been put on the front here probably in the mid-late 30s. But then immediately went into the roof area up here and took all the periphery around of the roof down and found where the rotted part was. My mother-in-law, who was swinging from the scaffold with me at 88 years old, and well, I can go on, but wonderful, all wonderful times.
First of all, I was the cook. I organized the food for the day. I held boards. I carried concrete blocks, whatever he wanted me to do. And then when I wasn't helping him, I scraped all this woodwork.
Every year and every day that we worked out here for these 10, 11 years, and I started, the first entry here was Thursday, August the 19th in 1982, and I say here, a first look at the house and so on and so on, and every day thereafter that we were here, that I'm speaking of we, my wife and I, June, and every day that I was here, I wrote down what we did. And I use it today to really make myself believe we really did this. I can't sometimes look back and say, we really couldn't have done this. But we did, and there's proof of it. And people love to see this. And they say, oh, on our anniversary, that's what you did. That kind of thing. It's wonderful.
Walt and June particularly remember the weeks of repairing, stripping, sanding, and refinishing the staircase. But when the work was done, the end result inspired an aim.
I had read at one time, and I love history, I just love to read history, that many, many years ago in the old England, the time of the castles and like that they didn't have the term stairways at that time. They called them rising halls. So it became obvious that the Rising Hall was the name, and it stayed and been great.
As the restoration continued on Rising Hall, days became weeks and months turned into years. Walt and June Prosser had not been in a hurry and had vowed to do the restoration first rate. Now a decade had passed, and they were finally ready to declare it finished. They invited some neighbors for an open house, and hundreds showed up, every one of them with a burning 10-year curiosity.
Those same people who laughed about the crazy man and his wife working on this house for so many years were the same folks that were lined up down the road for hundreds of yards to have the grand tour.
Today, Rising Hall is on the National Register of Historic Places and stands as a lasting symbol to the community. These days, when you drive down Old Highway 40, you'll pass by the house that the crazy couple spent 10 years restoring, thankfully.